For 2024. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. As you guys are all aware, we are joined today by Mr. Jonty Sacks from Jaltech. There he is.
Morning,
And
Ron.
we have a very exciting webinar ahead of us today. I'll just let Kyle run through some of our classic housekeeping notices and notes and things like that. And then I'll go ahead and introduce Jonty for us, and we can get started on this very exciting webinar.
Cool. Thanks, Nicole. So good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all doing well, and thank you so much for tuning into our first webinar this year. As Nicole said, this webinar is being recorded and published on our YouTube channel, so please remember to like and subscribe to us. You can also turn on post notifications to be notified the moment that this recording will be available, as well as any other time that we post. And then if you haven't already, please do subscribe to our newsletter. This way you'll be able to keep up with the TPDM Consultants team. We are also pleased to announce that we, amongst others, will be attending and speaking at the upcoming NAMI event, which will take place on the 19th of March at Durbanville Golf Club. But more information on that will be released soon. So that's all the announcements that I have for today. I'll hand over to Nicole so that she can give you more information about our speaker.
Awesome. Cool. So as I mentioned, Jonty joining us today from Jaltech. He is a partner at Jaltech, which is a boutique alternative investments fund manager. And he's also an admitted attorney who practiced as an attorney at E&S, Africa's largest law firm. And Jonty at the moment is responsible for driving Jaltech's growth and focuses his time at identifying new business opportunities, raising capital for the asset management division, and developing relationships with potential partners. I know he's got some very exciting words to share with us today on how to fund solar solutions. Over to you, Jonty.
Nicole, thanks very much. Carl, thank you. Thanks for putting this together. And everyone, thanks for joining us. I think it'll be quite valuable. So if you living in an estate, part of a body corporate, and you're really sick and tired of load shedding, and you're looking at solar as an alternative, we have a very interesting proposition in the market. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just mute everyone if you don't mind. And I don't know if anyone has questions. You're welcome to ask me the questions, I think, at the end. And
Yes.
You can then just unmute and take it from there. So I'm just going to mute everyone. So let me share my screen, and I'll take you through what we are offering in the market. So as Nicole rightly said, I'm one of the partners at Jaltech. We're a fund manager. We manage around 2 billion Rand. At the moment, we manage about 500 million Rand in the solar sector. And we're doing around 50 million Rand, a little bit more than that every month in terms of transactions that we're financing. And we have finance in various areas of the market. You can see property funds and body corporates, estates, large retail office parks, commercial office parks is a key sector of the market that we're financing. And we've done retail, agricultural, commercial properties. And you can see on the left-hand side of the screen the magnitude of the projects, with the bulk being around 100 kilowatts, but we've done 13% of 500 kilowatts and above, so really large projects. But the opportunity really, or where we're focusing at the moment, is we're really looking at body corporate estates, commercial and industrial parks, and farms, to provide them with a funding solution. So currently in the market, we just had load shedding. Our generator will kick in a moment. Quite ironic. So in the market, body corporates have various options. The most common is they realize that they want solar, so they'll get a solar installer to do an assessment, put up all these various meters, which really assess the amount of energy that the property is consuming. And then the solar installer will suggest a mixture of maybe just solar panels alone or a battery component. And then this ultimately comes down to a number. anywhere between 5 million and up for body corporates, and then the body corporate needs to finance it. And up until recently, most body corporates, they'll go to a traditional bank. So they'll meet with the solar installer. The solar installer will give them a quote, call it 10 million rand. They'll go to a bank, and the bank will say, great, we'll finance you, but not for the full amount. We'll give you 70% funding. You need to finance the balance. You need to put your property up as security. And this is an expensive process, and capital is needed. Some body corporates don't have such large reserves, but it's also a lengthy process. So once the capital then is made available, and the capital is made available to the solar installer, they'll come along and they'll install and then provide O&M services, which are really maintenance services for, 5, 10, 20 years, however long they've been appointed. So that's typically how things are done in the market. And there are downsides with this approach. As I mentioned, banks will only give you 70% funding. They'll charge anywhere up to prime plus 6%, but they'll only give finance over 5 to 7 years. Now, this is a very important point. When you take 10 million rand and you finance it over 5 or 7 years, the annual capital payments to the bank to service the interest and the capital is really high. So let's say on 10 million rand over 5 years, you're probably paying the bank 1.5 million rand a year. But that system only produces 1 million rand of electricity. So if you're paying the bank 1.5 and the system is producing 1 million rand of electricity per year, you have a shortfall of 500,000 rand, which the body corporate or estate or property owner needs to finance. And that has negative cash flow implications on the property. If you're able to extend the term to, say, 20 years or 15 years, invariably what happens is that the annual cash requirement drops in terms of what you're paying the financier. And this could be as low as 700,000, where the system's producing 1 million rand of electricity. So there's now a cash flow positive position for the property owner. So dealing with a bank limits you in terms of the term over which you can finance solar. And we think that that's an issue in the solar market. Solar assets, solar panels have 20-year life expectancy. So you really want a longer term. And that is the proposition that we have in the market. So how we work, and I see that some of my slides have disappeared, and how we work is somewhat different. We'll provide 100% funding. So we will assess your needs. We'll do a credit assessment on the body corporate or estate. And if it's not very creditworthy, then we may install meters and then make it prepaid. But we'll finance the entire project, 100% of the project, no security, no sureties needed, no deposit required from the body corporate. We'll fund it around prime plus 2, so very similar to the banks at the lower end. But where it becomes interesting is we'll finance over 10, 15, 20 years. So we'll really give long-term finance. And as I mentioned earlier, that could translate into an annual payment to us of 700,000 rand, where the system's producing 1 million rand of electricity. So the body corporate's in a positive cash flow position. In other words, it's cheaper from an annual basis or cash flow basis to work with us than the banks. And, this has been proven. We've done over 250 million rands worth of finance in the last 6 months. So our financing really, really is affordable. And our solutions are twofold. The one solution, which is I'm describing now, is we'll do a credit assessment and we'll lock a price. And the body corporate or estate will pay us monthly or every quarter an amount of money. It might escalate marginally. It won't escalate anywhere near where nurse is currently escalating at 10, 15% per year. So there'll be a fixed price, slight escalation, and the body corporate knows that's what they're paying and they can budget for it and, determine whether this fits within their affordability. That's our one option. Our second option is really where the body corporate doesn't want to take any risk around the solar assets. They want a turnkey solution, and they want really someone to do their own assessment, take risk on what systems needed. And what we do in this case is we'll do a joint venture with a solar installer, either a solar installer, which the body corporate may have an existing relationship with, assuming they've been around and meet our due diligence requirements, or we'll propose one of our solar installers. And what we'll do is we'll put together a funded package, and we'll then sell electricity to the body corporate. We'll typically sell electricity at a lower rate than what Eskom's currently charging, and it'll escalate at a lower rate than what Eskom is anticipated to cost over time. So what this does is really, there's no requirement from the estate or the body corporate to pay a monthly amount, fixed monthly amount. They will pay based on what they consume. So we will do those assessments. We will see, okay, great, this is what the body corporate or property consumes on a monthly basis. We'll install a system with or without batteries, depending on what the requirements are, and then we'll sell power at a rate which would be lower than Eskom. So from an estate's perspective, there's only upside. You need electricity, someone's going to be supplying it, it'll be uninterrupted electricity, and it'll be at a cheaper cost than Eskom. So we offer both, either of those two options in the market. In both cases, the property owner or the estate or the body corporate, at the end of the term, they can buy the asset from us at R1. And the term could be 10 or 15 or 20 years, however long that it makes sense really for the state or the body corporate. Our focus is really on new solar installations, and we'll also look at refinancing existing solar installations. So what may happen is an estate installed solar panels may want to add more solar panels, or may realize now that batteries are an important component and wants to add batteries. We'll look at refinancing the entire project at really good rates, either on a fixed monthly payment, as I mentioned, or on what we call a consumption basis. Whatever the estate consumes, the estate will have to pay, or the property will have to pay. So those are our two options really, or focuses. We only finance in South Africa. We fund between 5 to 70 million rand per project or group of projects. So if it was a body corporate with two buildings, where the first building is 3 million and the other is 2 million, we'd look at it as a group and we'd fund the entire group. As I mentioned, we finance 100% of the project value. We don't require any equity or any contributions from a bank, and we'll give up to 10 to 20-year funding. And our rate is really prime based and depends on how creditworthy the body corporate is. If it's very, very creditworthy, well then it'll be around prime +1. If not, then we'd look at a higher rate. We do have one of the largest teams in the market. As a business, there are more than 23 people in our solar business. There's, I think, 11 of us and growing, 12 on the screen. And we've got a mixture of accountants, actuaries. We've got 2 full-time lawyers in the business that really generate all the legal agreements. So our ability to transact, put a deal together to finance is really quick. Banks will take 6 months. We'll do it, our quickest transaction from due diligence to releasing the capital has been 2 weeks, which is unheard of in any banking sector. So we're really quick to act. And really the steps from here would be an assessment. So if your property or estate already has a solar proposal, well, all you need to do is send it to me, and we'll prepare pricing, and we'll then be able to, and we'll prepare pricing typically on the same day, and then we'll send that pricing to yourselves. The trustees can meet, make a decision. These things take normally long internally to make decisions, and then if there's an opportunity, we can work together. Or if you don't know, if you don't have a relationship with a solar installer, all I need to know is where it is in the country, and then I can make 1 or 2 introductions, and you can get competitive quotes, and then we can work together to finding a solar solution for you guys. So that's really it. It's simple. We are really hungry for investment opportunities. So we'd love to engage with the relevant people of the property. We don't, as I mentioned earlier, we don't only focus on estates and body corporates, and we do commercial office parks. We do, obviously, as I mentioned, residential, farms, large retail malls, etc. Anywhere where there's a roof, that we can install solar and then sell electricity. So, that's really our proposition. It's, I think, simple to understand, but if there are questions, we can open to the floor.
Perfect, Jonty. There are just some questions in the chat. The first one being, how does it work if the installation, if we go back to your mandate, how does it work if the installation does not provide 100% of the requirements? That was asked by Marion.
If the installation doesn't, I'm not sure I understand the question. If it does not provide 100% of the requirement. Okay, so of the estate. So let's say for instance, the estate consumes, I don't know, 100 kilowatts a day, and we install a system of 50 kilowatts, then the excess of over and above what we can produce would have to be supplied by Eskom. We wouldn't install, if the state's requirements are 100 kilowatts, we wouldn't install a 200 kilowatt system because it would just be overspeccing something at a huge cost. So we would want to get a balance where in the day we produce enough electricity for the state or the body corporate, and when people get home, that's where the main consumption is, that there's sufficient batteries installed so that we can supply the residents with electricity at night if and when there is load shedding. And I think what we all know, and it's very evident from, if you follow the market, is for the next 3 years, load shedding is pretty much guaranteed. Eskom have made it very clear in terms of their forecast that there will be load shedding, and we're feeling it really, really badly at the moment.
100%. Marion, I see that you had 1 or 2 more questions in the chat. If you'd maybe like to unmute yourself and ask Jonty directly.
Well, what I can do is I can go through these quickly. So the one question is, if we borrow from you, maybe we pay back early? Absolutely. Typically, we prefer only after 3 years. Putting these type of deals together takes a lot of time, effort, and we don't want to finance and then a week later there's an early payment. So ideally after 3 years, in some cases even after 5 years. Marianne, your one question, in total or partially, not really quite following the question. Yeah, you're welcome to unmute and ask if you like.
Perfect. And then I think you did already mention this, but does the funding include other items like plans, inverter setup, that kind of thing? I think you did mention that you include the batteries and things like that.
Yeah, batteries, inverters, all included. Just one question from Yapi is, would we finance only the common area? Absolutely, but it needs to, the funding requirement must exceed our minimum, which is 5 million rand. Marion, how can I help?
Yeah, I mean, if we borrow 5 million from you now, and then next year we decide that we've got 500,000 or 1 million surplus from somewhere, can we give you that back?
We would prefer any early settlement only to occur after year 3. Because it just takes a lot of time and effort to put these type of transactions together and get the funding available. So ideally after year 3 would be our preferred approach. There's another question from Marion. Any other questions? Okay. One question from Tony. I've done a feasibility for 3 schemes. The theory is all good and well, but the reality is these 3 instances, the financial modeling does not render these solutions viable if analysis is not thoroughly done and understood. Agreed. So, the key here is you really want to work with really reputable solar installers. And listen, the solar market is immense. There are thousands of installers in the market, but there are probably about 30 or 40 really reputable companies that have been around for more than 5 years that install megawatts per year. So the key is to get someone in who understands it. And then really it's for the trustees to take a view whether they're comfortable working with whoever they go with. So there is that risk. There is technology risk. There is capacity risk. But one way to alleviate this is to get multiple proposals and then see how similar they are and where one misses the other, and then really try and finalize the right system for the scheme.
I have a question for you. I was just wondering, when you undertake to the analysis and you first approach schemes and things like that, in your opinion, what would you say are, the most important conditions or considerations that a scheme should consider before they decide, like, is this project really for us? Like, what are our options, kind of thing?
Yeah, so I think the one is roof space. So, if you live in a scheme that has that's a very tall high rise with a very small roof or no land to put ground mounted solar panels, then it's not going to work, unfortunately. So that's a key requirement. The other is really, how badly are you affected by load shedding? What's the financials of the scheme? If the scheme is in dire financial situation, it's going to be difficult for us to finance. Those are the key, the key. Ultimately, load shedding should not be a consideration. What should be a consideration is the cost of electricity over the next 10 years. And I can tell you, and it's obvious from what Eskom or NERSA have announced, the next 3 years, the cost of electricity is going to go up around 15% to 18% per year. So it's going to become really, really expensive. Matthew, do you have a question?
Yeah, Jonty, hi, morning. One thing that's very interesting is like when obviously if a scheme takes your financial package and they install solar, and a common question that we get is what are the important conditions that they should include in their rules with regards to maintenance of the solar panels and decommissioning of the solar panels and all of those things. In your experience in dealing with schemes, what do you think is the most common issue after installation that bodies corporate are faced with from an owner's perspective?
So, there are two approaches, right? So as I mentioned, the one approach is where the scheme pays a fixed amount every month. On that approach, the scheme is taking some risk, right? They're taking risk that the system isn't producing well or underproducing. Where the other option is where electricity is sold to the scheme. Where it's sold to the scheme, then the scheme will pay whatever's produced, and whether the technology works or not is a risk that they're not going to have to take on. So in the first option, maintenance is critical. So you want to work with a reputable solar installer. Every transaction that we do, there's a fee, roughly 2% of the value of the project is paid to the solar installer on an annual basis, whether it's monthly or however it's paid. And then it's their requirement to make sure that the system performs. What we'll do with most of our solar installers is the solar installer has to, for a period of 3 years, guarantee a certain level of production. If the system doesn't produce at those levels, they either need to pay in or they need to install additional solar equipment in order for it to meet that requirement. After 3 years, that risk is really not material because, once these systems have improved over a 3-year period, other than maintenance, cleaning the panels, that kind of thing, which they're being paid for. And if they don't do it, then their contract will be terminated and someone else will do it. So there needs to be maintenance in place. It has to be built in. And we would only finance a opportunity where that maintenance component is dealt with on an annual basis.
Perfect. Thank you, Jonty.
Sure. There's a question. What is the cost for the initial assessment? So we wouldn't charge, neither would a solar installer. They would come, they would do the assessment, provide a proposal. We would provide a financing proposal. There would be no cost. Nicole, this recording, is it going to be distributed to everyone afterwards?
Kyle, I think Kyle is the man to speak to about that.
Yes, it gets put in our newsletter and then on our social media and YouTube.
Okay, great. So, I think if there is anyone who's holding back a question and they would like to answer it either today or at another point, my information will obviously be available, and so will Kyle's and Nicole. So, you're welcome at any point in time to reach out, and then I'll be able to see whether I can assist.
Perfect. I think there's just a one more question in the chat from Vimpy. Are you funding a central plant and or individual units per house? Each house will be fitted with an electricity meter and charged per usage to pay off the funding.
Our preference is to do central plant. If it's on a, and we wouldn't do this on a high-rise building, but more on an estate. On an estate, we'd look at individual, assuming that it's, a significant amount, whether it be 50 or 100 units. We wouldn't want to do it on 2 or 3 units. There are companies like Wetility, Versify, Go Solar. They offer that residential home installation.
Perfect. And then I think if you, just to finish us off, if you could just maybe run through the different kinds of, approvals and things like that that you from your side need before entering into any contracts with bodies, corporates and things like that. And also just a follow up to that, I'd be interested to know, obviously, what is your recommendation with, individual people within a community scheme wanting to do solar versus, the scheme itself wanting to power the common property and those kinds of things?
So, perfect. So the first really for us, so the steps would be, and then in it, I'll answer your question. The steps would be a proposal will be prepared by a solar installer. We'll send a financing proposal, and that'll go through the body corporate or the trustees or whoever is responsible. Once that's approved, we'll then do a credit assessment on the body, on whoever the, I keep saying property, I keep saying trust estate. Maybe I should use the word scheme. So we would do a credit analysis on the scheme, and then if that's given the green light, then we would proceed. And the credit assessment is really just, occupancy levels, Eskom statement to see whether Eskom has been paid. We'd hate to finance someone who's not paying Eskom; they're not going to pay us. And then just understand, real levies and things like that. So just general financial situation of the scheme. And then to your second question is individual. I think your question was individual schemes or the entire scheme. I think the entire scheme is the ideal. And then, that way everyone's on board. There's one system of monitoring and the supply. We'll then be able to manage the turning over from Eskom to the system we install and vice versa. So it's more simpler. But it's not to say that doing individual homes is not an option. It is an option with prepaid meters, etc. But they would need to be on a larger scale.
Zelinda, I see you have your hand raised.
I hope you guys can hear me. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfectly.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, guys. Hi, everyone. I'm busy traveling to an annual general meeting that unfortunately was called last minute, or at least my attendance was called last minute. Jonty, thank you so much for your time. A lot of questions that we get, obviously, in our consulting practice is a little bit more legal as opposed to practical, and I'm very interested to hear from your side, having your illustrious career as an attorney and your background as an attorney, some of the challenges that you have faced in approaching community schemes. We know that it's not sometimes as simple as, just engaging with 3 or 5 people, but rather a body corporate as a whole or a homeowners association as a whole. Do you have any, horror stories or success stories that you'd like to share in regards to just getting overall buy-in and permission to go ahead with a project like this?
Yeah, it is a question I was hoping not to get, because it has been it's been challenging. I must say we've financed a few projects, not nearly as many as we were working on, and that's really because to get consensus with so many people is really challenging. But ultimately, consensus prevail. Enough load shedding pushes decisions a lot quicker, but it is a lengthy turnaround time, which can be quite frustrating from our perspective. Non-scheme arrangements take, call it a month or 6 weeks to finalize. Scheme arrangements takes 3 to 6 months. So it is a bit of a more frustrating process, but it's, eventually they do close.
I think a very good piece of advice that you gave our listeners today was not to approach this on the basis of load shedding, excuse me, or at least to use the reason as load shedding, but simply to rather look at cost savings and how we're going with increases and the duration of how load shedding is going to be. I think that is probably a very good piece of advice as to how to get members to support it. At the end of the day, the body corporate does have to ensure times levies are kept reasonable, costs are kept under control, and that any arrangement that is made that is so permanent in nature or long-standing in nature is on the basis of something that is a little bit more controllable and a little bit more long-standing than simply the concept of load shedding. So thank you very much for that piece of advice.
Pleasure, pleasure. I see that there's a question from Claire, and it's around, if the minimum cost doesn't meet our requirements, what are the alternative solutions? And it is difficult. So, one would then have to go the traditional route of, of bank finance, or, that's really the options in the market at the moment. Tony, I see you got a question.
Yeah. Jonty, just an extension to Linda's comment. When was the first installations done by yourselves for schemes? In other words, what I'm trying to find is that one was done, say, 2-3 years ago. What is the cash? How has the cash flow worked vis-a-vis the liability of the body corporate to service the loan or the lease agreement against the generation? And has there been any shortfalls? And were those fund? And how do those schemes treat those shortfalls? Because I can only think it's an unbudgeted for expense. I only see special levies being raised to cover the shortfalls of these installations, if not, as I pointed out in my first question, if not understood and executed correctly, the consequences can be very real for a long-term commitment that they cannot get out of.
Mm-hmm. So Tony, typically schemes would look to approve a financing mechanism which is cheaper than what they're currently paying Eskom. So that then gives the trustees some peace of mind that they're not getting into an arrangement which will be more expensive than what they currently have. Our first scheme was only installed last year. We haven't had any issues with any of the projects that we financed. So I can't really comment on that. What I can say is ultimately we then force a special levy, and the residents would then have to contribute if there was a shortfall.
Thank you.
Sure.
Cool. And then if I can just jump in, there was more of like a legal question on the chat from Lucy. So if an individual owner would like to install solar within their unit individually, how we would recommend that the body corporate goes about implementing it would be in terms of the conduct rules. And we would recommend that the body corporate reserves specific spaces on the roof, if possible, like Jonty mentioned, with the high-rise buildings, demark specific roof areas as exclusive use areas for that owner's particular section. And then within the conduct rules, you would include conditions like the installation is only done by a certified electrician. You get the relevant certificates of compliance and this relevant certificate of compliance for the installation. We would also include a clause that would say something along the lines of the owner that installs solar panels on their EUA will be responsible for any increase in insurance premium, that kind of thing. So yes, we would recommend that it's done in terms of the conduct rules, and it's always our recommendation, if possible, to do it through an exclusive use area.
I'll just piggyback off of you there, Nicole. So if you are an owner that's interested and you would want to install solar on part of the roof, which we know is common property, then the conduct rules is our recommended course of action, which would require an amendment thereof. And for those, in case you don't know, is a special resolution. A layout plan would need to be drawn up, demarcating the specific roof area that you as an owner wish to use for your exclusive use for solar. And like Nicole mentioned, the conditions that will be added for the maintenance thereof, insurance premiums, decommissioning, installation, who are the suppliers, and then also importantly, a structural engineer or a report to show that the roof can sustain the weight of the minimum amount of solar panels which you wish to install on your roof area. And it goes back to what Jonty said earlier, is part of the first consideration is there sufficient space on your roof area EUA portion that can accommodate the panels which you wish to install for your specific needs. So it would be to get a special resolution amending your conduct rules to allocate an exclusive use area to you so that you can install the solar subject to certain conditions. So that is still a process which you will need to undergo with your fellow members, either at a special general meeting at the AGM or by a round robin resolution. Cool. Does anybody have any other questions? You can just unmute yourselves.
Cool.
Great, guys. Thank you very much.
Sorry,
Oh,
could
yeah.
I ask one more question?
Of course.
From a City of Cape Town perspective, they do have a list of recommended suppliers and installations. Would you recommend that one of the rules of the body corporate would be that it has to be on the approved City of Cape Town list?
Yes, you can include that for sure. The only thing that you wouldn't be able to do is say you can only choose from the body corporate's list of approved vendors or something like
Sure.
that. But something,
No,
yes, but something from the City of Cape Town, that's definitely reasonable. And of course, the scale of the installation is unique. Solar is a unique installation, so it makes sense that you would want to include like a stricter regulation of the kind of contractor that is used.
Yes, I think so. There has been talk certainly within our body corporate of importing panels from suppliers that actually have no support or maintenance or backup plan in South Africa. And that is a concern for some of the trustees, that we have no idea who this company is, how good it is, whether it would be appropriate. And I just felt that maybe some guidelines around getting sourcing systems that, have all of that backup and guarantee.
Perfect.
Yeah.
100%.
Thanks. Thanks,
Cool.
Marion. Thank you very much.
Cool. And then
Jonty, I just had a question for Jonty with regards to the accreditation. Is there, how are you accredited? Are you registered as a preferred vendor by which municipalities? If you are, just so that if people are interested in reaching out to you, they can, obviously give that to them.
We're not a solar supplier. We're a financer. So the suppliers, the installers, that need to be, but we're not. We're just a finance house.
Do you have a list of recommended suppliers that could assist as well with? Okay, perfect.
Yeah. So if someone is interested, they can reach out to me, and then based on where they are, I'll be able to recommend.
Wonderful.
See, Sandy has a
Sandy?
question.
Hi, sorry, I've just got one question in line with what Matthew just asked. In City of Ekurhuleni, I don't think they make recommendations of solar providers to actually use. So the general public basically go out there, go by word of mouth and actually see who's feasible, who's not, and actually see the previous work that they've done and if they're reputable in the area or not. Can we follow that logic?
If there isn't a list, then I can certainly assist. So you can reach out to me, you can tell me where you are, and then I'll suggest a handful of solar installers, and then you can engage with them. I wouldn't recommend someone that we wouldn't be willing to finance a project that they built. So that's pretty firm recommendation.
perfect. I've just popped Jonty's email in the chat function again, and I'm sure that Kyle, when we distribute the recording and everything like that, we will most certainly include your information. So if anyone has any questions that they might have been a bit too shy to ask, or they'd like to approach you directly for some assistance with their scheme, there is your email address. yeah. Anything else from Matthew, Kyle, or yourself, Jonty?
Just thanks very much. Nicole, Matthew, Carl, thanks for putting this together, and for everyone attending. It's been great.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your wisdom with us. And thank you so much for everyone for joining us on our first 2024 webinar for the year. We look forward to seeing everyone online for the rest of them. And I hope everyone has a lovely day and a lovely week further. Thank you so much.
Everybody.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.